Hey folks, in this video I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the concept of adjustments and adjustment layers. So let's start out with simply what is an adjustment? Well, an adjustment is a thing that we can do in Photoshop that tends to modify our image. For the most part, it modifies color properties and tonal values and things like that. And like so many things in Photoshop, there are right ways, and then there are, I don't want to call them wrong ways, but they're just maybe not as right. There are better ways to do things than other ways. That's all. So let me teach you how to do an adjustment, a single one, and then I'm going to show you a much better way to do it. So to access adjustments, you can go to Image and Adjustments, and there's a bunch of them here, right? So let's use a simple one. Let's use like Hue and Saturation. Okay, so what this does, what Hue and Saturation does, is it allows us to pick a preset if we want, and we have all these different kinds of things like a cyanotype or a sepia image or things like that. So if I create a cyanotype, basically it puts a really, high-end kind of cyan image on top of our line here, kind of creates this kind of like cold image of him. If I create sepia, it creates an old-timey photo look there. That's cool. That's great. I'm not gonna lie. Like if I go to old style, it kind of is. It's just more of a washed out kind of photograph look, right? These are all Instagram, filters, if you will, right? And it's cool. It's totally all right, right? Those are fine. Presets are fine. The way hue saturation works is we have a master control, or we can just control reds, or just control yellows, or just control greens, or cyans, or blues, or magentas. Okay, so let's just go ahead and control reds. And then when we do that, we basically just control these different things here on the visual spectrum. I can move my hue back and forth, and all it's going to do is modify things that fall inside of here. So the image would have had to have red in it for modifications to happen. So basically, when I look at this, okay, and I go ahead and I make it kind of like a magenta lion. See this area right here under its mouth? See how it stays like gray, kind of white, and here under its eye too? There was no red in there, basically, and that's the reason why it did that. So I could then go ahead and I could just say the greens, for example, and that's just over here. I can start to move these around. Do you notice how as I do this, the lion is not changing at all? What's happening though with the background? Check out the background. See these things? They're going crazy. It's because that's where green lived in the background. Those little kind of like bokeh areas right there. Oh, okay. So let's bring that back down. Let's go ahead and pick like yellows. Okay. Let's play around with that. Oh, here's the line shifting again. Right. Oh, crazy, right? So this is an example of hue and saturation. This is an awful example. I've turned our lion friend into like an irradiated Hulk pet or something like that, right? But here's the deal, guys, right? If I say okay, just like that, I have gone ahead and I have done a destructive edit to our image. That means that the pixels that create this lion that once had a color associated with them has been replaced with this green kind of demented looking color that is now attached to our lion friend. He looks like a weird lion from the Wizard of Oz, but not like the Cowardly Lion, but like the weird green lion, the Cowardly Lion's cousin. Anyway, let's go ahead and revert that and bring us back to our noble lion here. Okay, so I don't care if it looked good or if it didn't look good, because like that cyanotype looked pretty cool, right? Or the sepia looked cool. But the thing is that no matter what, both of those things, I would have destroyed the image pixels. I just, it's a destructive edit. And we really want to try to get away from those as much as possible. We'd rather do non-destructive editing because in the long run, that's going to leave us back doors to go ahead and tweak things if we need to. And, it's going to let us basically screw up and work with a net. And I've been doing this for a long time, 20 years at least, actually more than 20 years. And I screw up a lot. It's not, and I don't even call it screwing up. I kind of think of it as like I experiment a lot. And that way I'm not always doing the same like 2 or 3 different tricks. So I experiment, and if things kind of go like kind of, poorly, I don't have to start from scratch, and that's great. And the way that I just showed you, going to image adjustments and then picking your adjustment, the entire time I was in college, this is the way it was. Okay. So really, there's a much better way that we use now. So if we go to window and adjustments, okay, it's called the same thing, and this is what's kind of frustrating, right? That it's called the same thing. We'll get a window that pops open, and we'll get all these things here, right? And I just want to roll over them, right? Because there's just these little symbols, and I can use this drop-down menu too. And check it out: brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure, vibrance, hue, saturation, color balance, black and white, photo filter, channel mixer, invert, posterize, threshold, gradient map, color lookup, and selective color. Okay, check this out: image adjustments, brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure, vibrance, hue, saturation, color balance, black and white, photo filter, color mixer, color lookup, invert, posterize, threshold, gradient map, selective color. Hey, they're the same. Yeah, they're totally the same. Cool. Okay. So I can access these things through window and adjustments, right? I can also come here to my layer palette and click on this little half moon cookie, and they're all here too. So let's go to hue and saturation again. Okay. Now, instead of a big window, it opens up in this little window here called properties, right? And if I were going to go to window and adjustments and click on hue and saturation, which is one of these ones right there, properties is opened up too. So let's go to presets. Hey, there's my cyanotype. Cool. Here's my sepia. Cool. Awesome. All right, so let's just have let's put it out there. Is it okay to use defaults? Presets. Yeah, it is. Sometimes it's a good place to start. You want that kind of old-timey look, right? And you can sit there and you could struggle with it, right? Or you could just go ahead and pick a preset, and then you could just experiment from there. And you can say, well, I want it to have more saturation, or I want it to have less saturation. You can just start at that point. That's okay. You can always go to default too if you need to just like throw everything away. Now, just so we're aware, hue saturation allows us to change the hue, okay, of our image, the saturation, and the lightness, okay? So let's talk hue, right? That basically allows us to go ahead and modify the colors. So I can take all the colors in the image, right, and I can go ahead and I can turn them, kind of more like yellow or more blue or something like that. And I have that opportunity. Saturation is going to go ahead and let me either increase the intensity of that color or decrease the intensity of that color. Allows for that. Lightness is going to allow me to add light or add darkness, essentially. And then there's this thing down here called colorize. And colorize basically lets me just say, all right, I don't want to isolate a certain kind of thing. I just want to be able to color the whole thing. I just want to color this whole thing kind of like a blue color, and then play around with my saturations and either make it darker or make it brighter. That's what colorize does, right? And that's the hue saturation, right? And let's go ahead and I'm going to do colorize, and I'm going to make it kind of like a blue line. I think I'm going to go with that cyanotype, but I kind of want it like, I don't know, like I'm thinking like this is making me think of Lion, Witch in the Wardrobe, and how the lion is not so much the lion, but there's the Ice Queen and stuff like that. So I kind of am thinking I want the lion to kind of be in this sort of desaturated kind of blue tone, and that's that, right? And so what I have over here is I have a layer palette. And so I have the ability to turn those layer palettes off. And actually, I have two going on here. So let's throw that away for a second. That was just one that I opened up when I was just kind of playing around when we started. But check it out. there is my hue and saturation that I just did right here, and it's here in my layer palette. There's a mask here for me. Hey, so we know what we can do with masks. I can go ahead and I can paint on here. I can use a gradient if I felt like it. I do all sorts of cool stuff with mask, right? It's a layer though, cool. So you know what I have? I have an eyeball. I'm gonna turn it on, turn it off, right? Like a light switch. I could go ahead and play with the opacity, and I can have it come through more or less, right? This is like a dimmer switch now, right? Like, bring it down at 50%. Now, and look at the difference that I had from the original or from that really blue one that I had. Look what 50% gives me. So it's a totally different look and feel, right? And check it out. I have the ability to put blending modes on these things too. Whoa. That's some cool stuff, right? Some are gonna, you're gonna like more than others, but there's definitely some cool things. Check that out. That's like an ice lion, right? That's pretty cool. It's really cool, in fact. So you have all sorts of options if you utilize the adjustments as what we call an adjustment layer. And here's the best part. So I don't care if it's in a minute or in an hour or in a day or in a week or a month or a year or in 10 years, you can come back to this at any point you want. And you can just go like this. This little icon here, this little half moon looking cookie, go click, click, and the properties bar opens right back up. And you can say, I don't want it to be a blue line anymore. I want it to be a green lion, or I want it to be a magenta lion, or I want it to be a red lion. How about that? And I don't want it to be as bright. I want to pull it, making it a little darker. And I want to oversaturate that red. And yeah, you have that option because it's a layer. And then a day or a week or a month or a year or 10 years after that, you can come back here again. You can open this up and go click, click, and go, I don't know what I was thinking. Blue lines are the way to go. It's got to have less saturation and more darkness, or actually less darkness, but less saturation. And there you go. And here's the thing. We may change our minds a lot, right? Artists, designers, whatever, creative people, right? Whatever we call ourselves today. But you know who changes their minds more? Clients. All the time, guys. They're always changing their minds. So if you build with essentially a back door in place like this, then what you have is you have the ability to go ahead and just save yourself a lot of time and effort moving forward. And that's a really powerful thing, right? So that's something that really can be worth a lot down the line. Along with that too, along with the ability to go ahead and play with the opacity and the blending modes and have a mask and all that sort of stuff, well, you could also go ahead and you could put two of these things on top of one another, like this. So I can go ahead and say I have a, I don't know, how about an exposure, right? And that's going to go on top, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to overexpose it, which is going to make it really bright, or underexpose it, which is going to make it really dark. Then I can offset that exposure, and I can increase or decrease gamma. Look at that. That's pretty cool looking right there. And if you're like, well, I don't know if I like it, turn it off, turn it back on, turn it off, turn it back on. You might like it, you might not. You might say, I like it, but it's too much. Okay, how about we bring it down to 70%? Turn it off, turn it back on, turn it off, turn it back on. How about we change the blending mode to darken? How about we change it to multiply? Ooh, that's really cool. Look at that. Really, really cool. And I got that from a mixture of two, right? And here's the thing. Again, I've been using Photoshop for 20 years. I can go through each one of these things and I can tell you what it does. And I can give you like a definition. This one increases contrast, and that one goes ahead and aligns tonal values with, the curve of the histogram. I could tell you that stuff. I totally could. And you could open up your textbook. In fact, you can open up your textbook. Go to the back, look up adjustments, and they'll give you a chapter and a page, and go check it out. And you can read about every single adjustment, 100 of them. Actually, not 100 of them, all like 20 of them. But it's not that they do different things with images, but because they do the same inherent thing, but you just won't understand unless you do them. That's all there is to it. Like, I don't know how else to say it other than that. So what I have for you is I want you to do a couple things. One, I want you to do what I'm doing right now with the lion. I want you to open up an image, and I want you to open up a couple adjustments, and I want you to experiment. But then I have another thing for you, and that is this image right here. Okay? So what I have for you is I have a grid, and this grid is just a grid of Boba Fett helmets. Now, somebody asked me in one of my regular classes, what's Boba Fett? Boba Fett is a bounty hunter from the Star Wars universe. If you don't know who he is, look him up. Okay? Basically the coolest toy I had when I was a kid. So, when we go ahead and we apply adjustment layers to things that have multiple layers, like this, well, things happen. So let's take a look at them, right? So what I've got for you, and you'll be able to download this, is you've got this folder, or excuse me, you've got this file, and there are 25 Boba Fett heads. And they are rows A through E and in columns 1 through 5, right? And so what we have is we've got, and they say no adjustment or adjustment underneath them, right? So let's start with A. Turn on A, and we're going to open up this folder here. And we can even go ahead and just start here at A1. It says no adjustment, and that's fine. I'm going to leave it like that because I kind of want to have one that doesn't have an adjustment on it. So I have a sense what it's supposed to look like, what it'll look like originally, right? So I have this one here, A2. I'm going to click on adjustment, right? I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And you can do this with anything, by the way. You don't need to use Boba Fett heads. I just like Star Wars. I don't have anything else to say other than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select that layer A2 right there. And I'll just go ahead right up here, and I'm going to click on brightness contrast. And I'm going to just go ahead and apply it. And I'm going to increase the brightness or decrease the brightness. I'm going to increase the contrast or decrease the contrast. Okay. Now, do you notice how it's doing it to both of them? That's kind of weird, right? I don't want it. This one is supposed to have no adjustment on it. Why is it doing it to both? Well, here's how these things work, okay? This layer here, this brightness contrast layer, right? Notice it's above A2. It's above this text that says adjustment. It's above A1. It's above this other text that says no adjustment. It's above all that. It's even above this grid, right? It's above all that stuff. And the way that adjustment layers works, especially when there's more than one layer, and I'm going to tell you right now, you will have more than one layer. It's a normal thing. But when you have these things, more than one layer, and you want to go ahead and you want to apply an adjustment to one layer but not the rest, then you have to do what's called clipping them, okay? And right here on the properties bar, there's this little box here that is it's like a little box, and it's got a arrow that points down. So if I go ahead and I just click on that, then it's only going to affect the layer that's directly below it. Take a look even at the text. See how it kind of was washed out? Or even like the grid was kind of washed out, okay? So that all got washed out because I was jacking up the brightness and bringing down the contrast, right? So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply this And okay, so all right, that kind of looks cool. And when I look at the original, which is right here, that has no adjustments on it, and then I look at this, the one I modified actually looks a little bit better, right? I've increased the contrast essentially. So anyway, so that says no adjustment here, right? See that? So I should probably go ahead and say what the adjustment I did there. So I'm going to double click on here, and I'm just going to say brightness, contrast, and see how it like filled the area up. So you can go ahead and you can highlight that, and you can make this a little smaller. That's a 10 point. You can make it 11 point. There you go. And great, brightness contrast. Sweet. So now we know what brightness contrast does. Sorta, right? We have a visual of what it does. But I'm also going to provide you with this. Ah, look at this. What is this? These are notes. So A1, no adjustment. Original image, no adjustments made. A2, brightness, contrast. Okay, so I guess the question is, what did it do? I can even put like my stuff in there. So I'm going to click right on here, right? I'm going to say brightness 56, contrast 100. That's what I did, right? It's a whole lot of contrast. So brightness 56, contrast 100. And now I'm going to just start putting some info in here. How about like a, just a description, like what did it do, right? Slider, brightened image up, and emphasized, like kind of, I guess the dings in the helmet, right? The scratches in the helmet, the scratches in the helmet, added contrast. Cool. Yeah, that's what it did. I'll save that. Cool. So let's come back. Turn to the next one. Wow, and when you look at the two of them next to each other again, right? Just this one and this one. Big difference. All right. Well, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's 16 of these, Nick. Why are you have 25 on your grid. Your math is off, man. Well, yeah, I know. But here's the thing. Just, for giggles, let's go ahead and let's click on brightness contrast again. And let's just isolate it yet again, right? And I noticed this thing when I was there before, this little checkbox that said use legacy. So when I jack this up, right, and it does what I think it's doing, it's just making it brighter. What if I use legacy? What does that do? Oh, wow. Look at that. That like washes it out. I'm going to use the same numbers as I did before. Good thing I wrote them down. 56 and 100. Okay, let's try that out. So 56 and 100. Holy crap. Look at the difference. And that's using legacy, right? Because again, 56 and 100, well, that's 58, but pretty close, right? Look, that's what I expect, right? But then when I go ahead and I do it over here, wow, look at that. What a difference, right? So that made it super, super bright, right? And when I use contrast, it made it so contrasty that it blew the image out. Okay, so let's do it again. Let's go ahead and we'll double click on this and say brightness contrast, and maybe we'll just call it bright contrast legacy. That's a little big, right? So let's make it smaller. There we are. Cool. So let's come back here and say A3. Brightness contrast with legacy. And we'll do the same. Brightness 56, contrast 100. And then we'll just start going. All right, so legacy washed out image with brightness slider and blew out all colors with contrast slider. And you know what? These are my notes, so I'm going to just be honest with myself. Not extremely useful, in my opinion. So the thing is that like what I want to do is I want to fill this. And you might say, again, there's only 16, but there's 25 slots. But there's just that one had a checkbox. You'll find that you'll be able to fill up all 25 spots with options that you'll find in here. Like, hue saturation. We just looked at it, right? You can just pick one color. You could just pick the reds. Or you could go ahead and you can use a preset. Or, when you play around with, certain things like levels, like, you can really blow things out, or you can really, make them, really contrasty, or you can make them really flat, so you have a lot of options here for you to kind of like move forward with. So please kind of take that in mind as you're doing this assignment. And at the end of the day, this is what I want you to do with this. You're going to hand it in to me, sure, but I want you to go ahead and print this out, and I want you to put this in your notebook. And when you have to go ahead and you have to, do a job or do an assignment or a project or something like that, take a quick look at this and just see what these things do, rather than like sitting there and wasting time on them, because that's what ends up happening. If you don't do like little kind of assignments like this, you just end up wasting your time a lot, because you're like, what does this do? Oh, I don't really like that. Okay, how about this one? What does this one do? I don't really like that. How about this? What does this do? And it just takes a while for you to build that kind of visual library in your head of, I know what XYZ is going to do. Like for me, I know exactly what one I want to use to color correct, but I got 4 or 5 right there for me to pick from. And more importantly, I know which one is my number 2 choice or my number 3 choice. So if my number 1 choice, which I won't lie to you, is levels, I really like using levels. If I want to color correct something, I'm going to use levels. If it doesn't work out the way I expect it to, then I'm going to go right into curves. Curves are a little harder to work with, though, in my opinion. But they can get into the fine details a lot better than levels. Levels a broad stroke kind of thing, and curve is a detailed thing. And so, like, if I can use levels, I'm gonna. But if there's too much detail, I'm gonna go ahead and use curves. I don't really love brightness contrast. In fact, I joke around and call it brightness evil. Because actually, I call it brightness evil because this is the brightness contrast, the legacy one. That was the one that was around when I learned Photoshop. The new one is such a better algorithm. It works so much better. Like that's a nice kind of color correction, tonal correction compared to that one. A little washed out, but not too bad, right? Nothing like that, right? That sucks. But the thing is that, again, you got to practice these things to get good at them. And this assignment's going to allow for that. So, if you don't like Boba Fett, that's fine. Make your own. You can make it like, your face if you feel like it. I don't care. Something you recognize. Again, I'm a Star Wars fan. I recognize Boba Fett. And, Star Wars is a multi-bazillion-dollar industry, so I got a feeling that a lot of people recognize Boba Fett. But maybe not everybody, so that's okay. So, so adjustments. So start out, do a couple like I did with the Lion, right? And then after that, go ahead and jump into this assignment and bounce through these 25 different Boba Fett helmets. And also, always keep in mind that you want to clip them specifically to the layer that you're working on so they don't affect absolutely everything below it, or else that will be not even sort of useful for you. Okay? Enjoy. Thank you.